Hello, friends, and welcome to another TechNet Live webinar series. My name is Jeff Alexander, and I'd like to welcome you to this series of TechNet Live webinar series that we're going to be running over the next few weeks on modernizing your data center with the hybrid cloud and Windows Server 2016. Previously, we've done quite a lot of different webinars. The last set of webinars we did was on Windows 10. This time we're going to be moving into the data center, and we're going to be talking about Windows Server 2016 and also Azure Stack and also System Center. So my details are there on the slide, and you can get in touch with me at about.me/Jeffa36. That'll have all my details of where you can get in touch with me. So each week at 11 a.m., we are going to be running a series of webinars. And this is the topics that we're going to be covering over the next few weeks. Now, as we go through each of these webinars, I want you to keep one word in mind, in the back of your mind when we're talking about those. So today, when we're talking about the cloud and what it means to bring the cloud to your data center, I want you to keep that word cloud in your mind. After this introduction session, in subsequent weeks, we're going to be talking more about Windows Server 2016 in the areas of virtualization, storage, networking, the new Nano Server feature. We will highlight that a little bit in this particular opening session. We'll move on into what it means from a hybrid cloud management, talk about containers, and then we're going to talk about Azure Stack, and finally close with some of the new changes that we've made in System Center, in the next version of System Center around management. Okay, so strap yourselves in. Let's get started, and we're going to kick this off with how you can go about bringing cloud to your data center. So we all know that there is a fundamental tension going on right now that is driving a lot of change in organizations. So there's a fundamental tension between what the business actually needs and how central IT needs to be able to enable the needs of the business. Now, we all know that business is moving faster today than ever before, and people are needing to react more quickly to changing dynamics that are in the marketplace right now. On the other hand, though, IT is still fundamentally motivated by stability and consistency on their infrastructure. Cloud could be the mechanism that can help drive that transformation to enable the speed and innovations that a lot of these organizations today. And we're going to really kind of talk about the hybrid model and what we're actually bringing from a cloud perspective at Microsoft to help you with a lot of these transitions. So right now, if you look at the data center and a lot of customers that I actually talk to have what we call the traditional data center, and they've been running that for a number of years. I ran that a few years back. I managed the data center here at Microsoft, and that particular data center itself was really tightly coupled between the infrastructure and the apps. And it was, we spent a lot of money on expensive vertically integrated hardware, and we had a scenario of siloed infrastructure and operations, and it was not very customizable. And apps in traditional data centers tend to be hard-coded with the infrastructure itself. So when you think about that, it makes things a lot more rigid. What's really needed is the ability to decouple the applications from the infrastructure so that IT can actually has the freedom to decide where they should run without sweating where that infrastructure actually resides. And application owners can benefit from this change as they can focus on specifying app requirements without having to worry about to get into infrastructure details about their application. They just want an app that they need to run. And when you think about it, infrastructure is expensive for monolithic proprietary hardware that needs a lot of food given it, needs a lot of feeding, needs a lot of nurturing. They tend to be very complicated. You need storage experts. You need people that are experts in hardware. You need people that are experts in networking to be able to manage these systems. When you talk about the cloud model itself is a very loosely decoupled scenario around micro apps and around coupled apps and microservices. And it was really founded in PaaS and IaaS. And particularly on Microsoft Azure Cloud, founded in PaaS means that we had a lot of startups that were using PaaS because they had no infrastructure. They didn't have a traditional data center. We used industry standard hardware in Microsoft Azure, and you're going to hear us talk a lot about the software-defined data center. And when you start moving to the cloud model, you start to bring in not new terminology, but terminology such as DevOps that gives you looking at a much more service-focused scenario. And we kind of tend to look at standardization of processes and configurations across all these particular scenarios. The traditional data center approach tends to have unique custom-built processes and tools that have been built over the years. We tend, in contrast, in a modern approach, we standardize our processes and infrastructure configurations, resulting in much more predictable in the way that we actually look at this, efficient operations. So if we look at, we compare that, and what we're trying to do with some of the new technology coming from Microsoft and new versions of Windows Server is to bridge the traditional data center and the cloud model to bring you a truly hybrid model that you can use in your data center today. Now, oftentimes when I talk to customers, they talk about cloud as somewhere they have to move to. I have to move all my infrastructure to the cloud. I want you to think of cloud as not a place, but an architecture. Think about that for a section. Cloud is an architecture, it's not a place. And what we're trying to do and what we've been building since Windows Server 2012 is to take a lot of those things that we've learned from Microsoft Azure and bring that into Windows Server for on-premises environments. And of course, when you look at this with Microsoft Azure, we have a cloud infrastructure that allows us to deliver IaaS, PaaS type solutions. And we're going to make that, and whether that's running on top of a Windows server, a Linux server. We recently announced that Red Hat Linux Enterprise is now available in Microsoft Azure. We don't care what that is. And that gives you a platform for you to run your applications, or the business to be able to run their applications on that architecture. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes we're making in regards to that. But think about it as we go through this today about the fact that cloud is not a place. Cloud is an architecture. I want you to keep that in mind when we talk through the rest of the presentation. Now, there is a transition that we see going on. Obviously, from when you're moving from a traditional infrastructure, there is a bit of a transition that you have to be able to deal with as you move from that. You have to have, in order for us to allow you to get to this hybrid model, we have to have consistency from your on-premises infrastructure that you have inside your organization to those services that you're going to provide in the public cloud. How do you actually manage from the cloud? And later on, I'm going to show you a demo about how we actually do that with the new server management tools that are in Microsoft Azure. We know that you have to applications that you need to give your users to actually use. And we want to make sure that you're able to write those applications, deploy them anywhere, whether it's in a public cloud, whether it's in a hosting provider, or whether that application is going to sit on premises in your data center. And this is what we call, and you're going to hear a term I talk about later on, what we call born in the cloud applications as we move forward. So let's have a look at some of the things that we're thinking about and that we're working on with Windows Server 2016 and also our other applications to help organizations transform the way they do IT. And we're going to break it down into these 4 buckets. And you can see across, we've got these 4 buckets, and then we've got a bunch of products that kind of apply to that. We're going to touch on, in today's presentation, we're going to touch on Windows Server a fair bit. We're going to cover Azure Stack in a future session that we're going to do in a few weeks' time. We're going to cover System Center at the end of this webinar. I'm going to touch a little bit on Operations Management Suite. I'm going to introduce Azure Stack today, but I want you to keep these things in mind when we talk about transforming IT. Software-defined data center. We've been talking about this since about 2012. When I talk to customers, I say as long as you get to Windows Server 2012, you're going to get on a path to a software-defined data center. And how do you bridge the gap with a cloud service delivery model in the middle of that? And how do you build out a management application platform with born in the cloud applications and then be able to manage that stuff from no matter where you are? So I'm going to have a look at that first piece and see where Windows Server 2016 is going to be delivering on this. and how we're actually looking at that. So I'm going to look at each one of these individual pieces today so that you can see where we're mapping that to our products. Now, when we talk about a cloud-inspired architecture, that is something that we're really doing and we have been doing for some time with Windows Server on the on-premises environment, that we're bringing a lot of our learnings that we're getting from Microsoft Azure and bringing that into our on-premises. And here's a few of the things that we've got in Windows Server 2016, that we've already been doing in Microsoft Azure, and we're bringing to on-premises. And I want you to look at the word standard across all of these. Standard compute, industry standard servers, standard APIs for networking, standard APIs for storage, standard APIs for security. We're bringing in TPM-enabled virtual machines. When you think about this, moving, the networking stack that we're bringing into Server 2016 is the data plane that we've had coming from Microsoft Azure. We'll talk about a few of these things as we go forward, but I wanted to just highlight this to make sure that we're there. Now, when we talk about this, what we're really seeing here is that with Windows Server and the Hyper-V that's integrated into Windows Server and System Center, we're taking the designs and the technologies that we had in Microsoft Azure and we're infusing those across the stack and making sure that those are available in Microsoft Windows Server 2016, Hyper-V, and also in System Center, to make sure that as you move towards this cloud-enabled or cloud-inspired architecture, is that you want to make sure that you're using the same technologies and that you're not going to have any surprises or changes as you move forward with that. Now, the first piece of this is around compute. And we want to get to a notion of being able to confidently virtualize anything. And I think, look, we've been in this mode for a little while. I think nowadays we've seen a lot of organizations be able to virtualize most of their workloads. So we're certainly seeing that improving and moving forward quite a lot nowadays. One of the things that we get a lot of feedback is that moving from one version of an operating system to another is just a really hard task. So what we're trying to do is to bring what we call cloud cadence into infrastructure upgrades. Now, we saw this with Windows 10, and a lot of people have already upgraded to Windows 10. You may have already upgraded that to yourself, and you did what we called an in-place upgrade to Windows 10. And essentially, when we talk about those in-place upgrades, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't do those types of upgrades. We rebuilt machines, and that made it really hard for us to do any kind of infrastructure upgrade, whether it was backend servers or whether it was users' desktops. Today, what we're going to be moving towards with Windows Server 2016 is what we call frictionless infrastructure upgrades, and we're introducing in our clustering environment is what we call rolling upgrades with no downtime. In a concept of what we call mixed mode clusters, and essentially meaning that if you have a cluster, say if you have a cluster running Server 2012, 2012 R2, you can run that cluster in a mixed mode while you're in the process of upgrading that cluster to Server 2016. This is going to be what we call frictionless upgrades, meaning that we don't turn on the new features that are available for clustering in 2016 until we've moved all nodes in that cluster over to 2016. So that's kind of some of the things that we're trying to make changes to make this whole process a little bit easier. From a virtualization point of view, we're making sure that we have best-in-class support for Linux. Benchmark setting scale that we've had in Server 2012 previously before. We're adding some new things in there around, and we'll talk more about this on the second webinar that we do around virtualization, about high performance live migration and storage quality of service. We've made a number of changes in that area. And being able to not only put smaller workloads in virtualize, but put your mission critical applications that run on top of SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, SAP, and Oracle in a virtualization environment, and being able to support common Linux distributions like Red Hat Linux, SUSE, Ubuntu, and CentOS. We've added the ability to hot add and remove virtual NIC cards, and in guest adding the VRSS or virtual receive side scaling into virtual machines that was previously only available in physical hardware. So there's a bunch of things that we're adding in there to help make it really easy, and you can confidently virtualize a lot of your infrastructure. I'm going to throw in nuggets in this as we go through this, stuff that I've actually seen in Server 2016 that makes it really easy for this. For example, the REFS file system can now be used as a container store for virtual machines, and it's far more efficient than using NTFS. What about networking? Now, a lot of the stuff that we've done in networking, we have done for quite some time. This is probably one of the first areas where we brought a lot of stuff from Azure into Windows Server 2016. First of all, we focused on cloud scale fundamentals. So the data plane in Windows Server 2016 is based on the data plane that's in Azure. What does this give us? It allows us to move to an environment where we have high throughput, low latency packet processing, up to 40 gigabytes on that. We've also added a new programmable network controller as a feature that you can add into Windows Server 2016 that allows you to program that network controller, and so that you can start to implement a software-defined infrastructure. We introduced network function virtualization, strong isolation with Hyper-V network virtualization in Windows Server 2012. That is actually being enhanced in Windows Server 2016. We still support NVGRE, we support VXLAN, and OFSDB support. The load balancer, however, is where we're kind of making some improvements in that. That is in fact based on what we've been using in Azure. So that's actually been enabled in Server 2016. We've made changes to the distributed firewall, custom service chaining, including Linux appliances. And when we talk about the hybrid data center extension, that is supported through ExpressRoute and through our multi-tenant gateways that we introduced in Server 2012 R2. And supporting all those gateways in that from a networking point of view. The third area where we've actually made a huge amount of changes, and it's funny when I talk to customers about storage, they still think in the concept of SANs and all that kind of stuff. We introduced storage spaces way back in Server 2012 and enhanced that in Server 2012 R2. And so storage spaces allows us to take commodity, low-cost commodity hardware and make a very much a kind of a shared storage that can be used in scale-out workloads. What we're adding to this in Server 2016 is the ability to not only use shared storage that might be in a JBOD enclosure or something like that, but to use what we call storage spaces direct. And storage spaces direct gives us an option to be able to use any commodity storage that you have, and this is DAS attached storage, that you can attach to a particular VM and then get your replication across all those VMs. Set up a cluster without having to actually have shared storage. So that gives us a lot more options in the way that we can build out our systems. We also have the ability to do replication or sync replication with storage replica, being able to replicate across servers with this storage spaces direct. And we're integrating in with our Store Simple products, our Azure storage, and making sure that we're workload aware through tools such as, if you're backing up through Azure Site Recovery, Microsoft Azure Backup, or you're using a traditional on-premises solution like Data Protection Manager, will have that capability as well. And then we're talking about stretch clusters having the ability to do automatic failover. Now, as I said, we'll cover a lot more of this, and we'll cover each one of these in each of the sections. We'll cover this in the storage section later on in the webinar series. The purposes of today is to really kind of give you the overall broad brush view of what we're actually doing in this space. Now, the third area a lot of people ask about is security. We live in a world right now where threats of attacks are happening far more than they previously did. And we've run into a situation, a very curious information about access to the fabric when we've actually virtualized environments, is that virtualization administrators tend to have more access than domain administrators. And so what we actually have started to look at is we're looking at in Server 2016 is to be able to protect the virtual machines from the host itself. That means that we're going to be moving to hardware-based rooted security and what we call shielded virtual machines. Okay, so a shielded virtual machine is a machine that can't be taken off that machine and spun up, exported, and run somewhere else. And it uses the host guardian service to allow us to protect that. And what we want to be able to do in this particular scenario is to give administrators just-in-time administration, or what we call just enough administration, to be able to manage those machines. You know, we're going to be enhancing the file classification infrastructure, integrating with rights management service. We've added out-of-the-box anti-malware that's in Windows 10. Okay, so Windows Server 2016 is going to have Windows Defender as its out-of-the-box malware solution. And when we set up Windows Server 2016, we default to Server Core, so we have a much smaller footprint when we talk about how this works. You know, so there's a lot being going on in this, and we'll cover that a lot more when we talk about virtualization and what we're doing in regards to virtualization from a security perspective. So what's actually new in Technical Preview 4? Okay, so Technical Preview 3 was out a little while ago, and we introduced a number of different things in Technical Preview 4. The areas that we're focusing on in Technical Preview 4 is to make sure that we're addressing some of the feedback that we commonly get within this. And the first thing is around compute, and the first thing is nested virtualization. So in Technical Preview 3, we introduced the new Azure Consistent Software-Defined Networking Stack with the new network controller. And that was something that was, you know, very early on in that. And what we've added to this now, and I've moved on into network, I'm going to come back to the nested virtualization, is the ability to deploy in what we call highly available mode. So, you know, we've had that ability to do that. So when you think about compute, is we've had that nested virtualization. And if you want to play around with nested virtualization, the easiest way for you to do that is if you have a Surface Pro 4, Surface Book, that has the TPM chip that you need in it to be able to run that. So if you've got a Surface Book or a Surface Pro 4, and you got a decent amount of memory, here's how you can test nested virtualization. Deploy a server core box, which takes up very little memory, install the Hyper-V role, and then run a VM off that Hyper-V node, and that'll work. So the other thing we're starting to introduce from a compute perspective is what we call node fairness for better resource utilization. If we see that we want to make sure that we're balancing the workloads across a cluster to make sure that we're going to better utilize the resources that we have in a cluster, hence making sure that our application is going to work. So that's a big thing. We've also, guest clusters can now resize shared VHDX storage without networking. Sorry, without downtime. So the other thing that we've done from a networking point of view is improved east-west load balancing. We're really focusing on the east-west scenarios for that as well to be able to do that. Provide better east-west load balancing, tenant traffic being load balanced across multiple gateways and segregated for traffic type, whether it's MPLS, IPsec, and support for live migration. In TP4, we've also introduced virtual machine queue to enable up to 10 gigabits performance and much better support for container network with support for NAT and transparent IP addressing. Storage is where, you know, obviously we've made the changes with storage spaces direct for increased efficiency. And we know that a lot of people have a bunch of hardware, they have a bunch of disks that are on their machines, and we want to make sure we give you that option. Storage Health Service gives you a single monitoring point per cluster, and Storage Quaz offers flexibility with maximum bandwidth settings. So no longer do we have just the minimum bandwidth settings for a VHD, but we can actually set the minimum and the maximum for those VHDs. We're also going to be leveraging TPM hardware much more in servers. So when you're looking at servers on premises, you want to look at TPM-enabled hardware to give you access to things like shielded VMs. And we want to get to a point where we have just enough administrators, just enough administration for domain controllers for server maintenance roles. You know, a fabric administrator or a virtual machine administrator should not have all the keys to the kingdom. They should only have access to what they need to do from a virtualization perspective. Okay, so let's have a look briefly at cloud service delivery and what we're actually looking at there. So when we talk about, you know, business and IT today live in different worlds, and we need to be able to align the needs of business and in IT. Businesses tend to be in a turbulent and innovative world. We hear the word innovation quite a lot. IT strives for predictability, control, build procedures and processes to make sure that their environment stays up and running. Keeping the lights on is really what they're all about. You know, businesses are generally in a less controlled environment that is required to deliver things a lot faster. And the term IaaS and PaaS around application development and deployment is really, you know, and these worlds tend to be incompatible. And you might have heard a term called shadow IT, where, you know, if you as an IT department are not providing the services that a business needs, they're going to go around you and they're going to go to a cloud provider. And once they go into that cloud provider to provide that need, it's going to be very, very hard for you to get them back. So you need to have some sort of ability to do cloud service delivery. Cloud service delivery allows you to deliver cloud-like architecture. Remember, I said cloud is a place. Cloud is not a place. Cloud is an architecture. You need to rethink your architecture for you to be able to provide cloud service delivery on premises in your environment that your IT department is going to need. So it allows each of those environments to operate in their same style, but still be able to actually work better together with each other. So what cloud delivery really offers, it still gives that agility to the business. It gives that control to IT, but it gives you both the ability, flexibility to both choose both choice of clouds and the tools and technologies that you're going to provide. So, you know, what we started this journey a little while back with Azure Pack, and the Azure Pack allowed us to take the infrastructure or the architecture for IaaS and PaaS and bring that on premises into organizations to be able to provide some level of cloud service delivery to organizations. And it kind of looked like this. You had your portal over in Microsoft Azure, and you were providing some cloud infrastructure to your business, running that on top of Windows Server or Linux VMs to provide IaaS and PaaS services. To do this on premises in the past, you had to use the Azure Pack, which combined with System Center to give you some functionality that you needed to provide the same cloud service delivery on premises. Now, we got a lot of feedback from customers that, you know, that wasn't completely sufficient, and so we're kind of working to be able to provide the same portal and the same infrastructure to give you the power of Azure with the control of the data center itself. And so that is where we kind of right now, if you look at, you know, at the time of recording of actually doing this webinar, we had technical preview 1 of the Microsoft Azure Stack. And the Azure Stack is essentially that. It is Azure in your data center. Right now, if you go and you download the technical preview 1, you can basically take a version of Azure and you can run that in your infrastructure that it's powered by Windows Server, System Center, and Azure technologies that gives you the same Azure portal, gives you the same look and feel that you have with Microsoft Azure, but it gives you a cloud service delivery model so you can prevent a lot of the shadow IT that's going on today. So that gives you a much better view of what that. So when you look at the Azure Stack architecture, it's still talking about providing, you know, the same tools: compute, storage, network, software-defined compute, software-defined infrastructure, software-defined storage, IaaS, PaaS. We're going to still use the Azure Resource Manager, which is the new way to deploy to the new Azure portal. It starts to open up DevOps processes and tools. Gives you the same portal to deploy that. So it's giving IT management the tools that they actually need. So let's have a look at and see what the Azure Stack actually looks like. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a really quick demo that shows you the comparisons between what Azure looks like, and then what Azure Stack looks like, both from a UI perspective and also deploying services into both of these environments using Windows PowerShell. So let's have a quick look at it.
Okay, so let's have a look at Microsoft Azure Stack, which is a new cloud platform hybrid product that allows you to bring the services of Microsoft Azure and deliver those in your on-premises data center. So let's have a look at how that compares to the Azure portal in Microsoft Azure. So here I am in Microsoft Azure. And as I would normally do in Azure, I would group things into what we call resource groups. And essentially, resource groups are a wrapper around all the resources to manage simple or complex resources within Azure and manage them as a whole. So I'm clicking on this resource group. And this resource group has a number of resources. In this case, I'm looking at a particular virtual machine. And that particular virtual machine, I can look at all the network interface on that particular device. In this case, I'm looking at the NIC card to find out its public and private IP address. And if I go over to the Azure Stack portal, which, by the way, looks exactly the same as Microsoft Azure, I'm again going into resource groups and having a look at the resources that I have within this resource group that I'm making available to my internal customers. Here I have a virtual machine, and in this case I'm looking at the virtual machine's network NIC properties so that I can troubleshoot any issues that might be going on with that machine. Again, it's showing me its public and its private IP address. Now, of course, we're not stopping there. We're taking this not only from the UI, but also at the API level. So essentially here I've got a deployment script that allows me to use a JSON template to deploy a virtual machine into Microsoft Azure. The first thing I got to do is associate the integrated scripting environment with the right Azure account. In this case, in this first part, I'm going to associate this with my public Azure account. I'm going to choose a location, in this case, which is West US, and I'm going to run this script that is using a JSON script that's going to deploy a simple virtual machine. It's going to go ahead and run that particular selection. And that was succeeded, and it's been deployed to Azure. Now we can take that same script and we can use that on our Azure Stack deployment inside our data center. So for example, I'm going to associate integrated scripting environment with my private Azure account. I'm going to choose the blob storage where we want to actually locate this virtual machine. In this case, it's going to be my blob.azurestack.local. And I'm going to use that same script again, that same JSON template that I had there, to deploy that virtual machine. Fairly simple and straightforward, but we're not stopping there. We know that developers are using Visual Studio, and we want to make sure that they're able to actually use the same tools that they use against Azure right now. Now you can see here that I've got Visual Studio, and this version of Visual Studio has the Azure SDK installed. And I'm going to choose my private subscription, and you can see once I do that, it has the resource groups that I can deploy that to. Now, of course, we can also interface with Azure Stack and have a look at our storage accounts. We have the same blob storage technology APIs in Azure Stack that we have in Microsoft Azure. So here I'm going to go and have a look at one of my blob storages, just to show you that this particular blob storage currently does not have any files in it. And I'm going to go have a look at my blob service. And I'm going to have a look at the containers that are inside that blob service to see if there's any data there. Okay, you can see I've got a container called My Photos. Right now I don't have any photos in this, and I'm going to use a third-party tool called the Azure Storage Explorer, which is a tool that many of you have probably used to interface with your storage blobs directly in Azure. With no code changes, we're able to actually use the Azure Storage Explorer to connect and upload, in this case, a JPEG file up to my Azure Stack blob storage. And when I refresh this, you'll see that bfs.jpg is actually there now. It gives me a URL, just like it would do in Microsoft Azure. And when I copy that particular URL, you will see that it allows me to render and show that our good friends Jeffrey Snover and Mark Rosinovich are in fact best friends. So hopefully this short demo has given you a very good introduction into what we can actually do with Microsoft Azure Stack and be able to bring the power of Microsoft Azure to your data center.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a very, very good sense of what Azure Stack actually looks like and how you can actually use Azure Stack. I encourage you to go up and have a look at that, download Technical Preview 1 and have a look at Azure Stack because it's got some really good information. We'll go into a lot more detail on Azure Stack as we move forward with this. We'll be doing that on the second last webinar that we're actually doing. Details will be up on the registration site for that. So let's take a look into my third pillar, which is the modern application platform. The goal that we really have is to write once and deploy anywhere. So if you think whether you're deploying into Microsoft Azure, whether you're going to deploy on premises using Azure Stack, or you're going to use Windows Server or Linux servers, we want to make sure that you have the ability to write once and deploy everywhere. And we're adding some technology into the operating system to make sure that you can do that, whether it's actually you're deploying to a virtual machine, whether you're going to use the new container features in Windows Server 2016, or to the Azure Service Fabric. We know that we have to make sure that our applications have the ability to deploy anywhere. And we have this notion, and we've probably seen a term that we call born in the cloud applications, and they're not written and tied to hardware. They're designed for cloud agility. They're designed differently with elasticity and scalability in mind. They're designed to be constantly upgraded. And to be changed all the time. Gone are the times where you have a major revision release. We're constantly innovating. You think about how we do Windows 10 today. We're constantly in this continuous innovation of upgrading and adding new features. Azure's the same. We continue to add new features. Last year alone, we added over 500 something features to Microsoft to Microsoft Azure. You know, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sharing services for increased speed. And gives us options to leverage some of the dynamic data resources we're going to have, data sources we'll have access to. Now, I want to introduce you to a term, a new deployment option that we're going to have in Windows Server that's really going to help us move towards our consolidation area and also to strengthen and allow us to distribute those next generation born in the cloud applications. Windows Server 2016 has a new deployment option that is what we call Nano Server. And this is what we call just enough OS. We constantly get feedback from customers about how big Windows Server has become, how big it is to install, how large the VM is when I build a service, how much I have to patch a server, how much I have to reboot a server. What we're going to be moving towards, and I want you to think about Nano Server as the future. We're laying the foundation for Windows Server for the next 20 years. It's just an OS and it's optimized for those modern applications. It allows us to dramatically increase our density and performance and reduce the attack surface and servicing requirements to allow us to deploy those next generation applications. But at the core, it's Windows Server. It is Windows Server, and it'll deploy those existing applications. So that's a new deployment option that we're going to be really talking more about in a upcoming webinar series that we have coming up. But if you look at Nano Server is designed for containers and modern applications. It's just enough OS. Get this, folks, it's only 400 and something megabytes to install it. Think about that for a second. Megabytes, 400 and something megabytes, not gigabytes, 400 and something megabytes. That's quite a massive reduce. When you look at traditional VM workloads, you would still deploy onto a server core environment. All right? You still want to do that. Nano Server certainly will host virtual machines, but we're going to be targeting really at containers and modern applications. Server core is your lower maintenance server environment option. It's really the one that you should be deploying in your Hyper-V deployments. Third-party applications, if you still have a reliance on third-party applications or you have to deploy a remote desktop services environment, RDS in your environment, then you're going to need a full GUI. We don't default to that in Windows Server 2016. We default to the server core one in the middle. Nano Server itself is a separate install. It's on the ISO itself for Technical Preview 4, there's a separate Nano Server folder. And in that Nano Server folder, you have all your install and your PowerShell scripts to deploy Nano Servers. So we see a lot of customers sitting in that traditional VM workload in the middle with other options where they're moving to Nano Server or still hanging out with the full GUI. So when we talk about Nano Server, why are we talking about this notion of containers? All right, so Containers is really something that has been happening for quite some time in the Docker world. So we have a very, very strong partnership with Docker, and we're doing a lot of work in the container space. Containers are really all about these four things. Speed. First start, it's dead quick to spin up a container. It doesn't take nearly as long to spin up a virtual machine. It takes very dramatically less time. You get higher increased density workloads. And when I've been talking about virtualization for a number of years. And Gartner did a study back that, if you look at traditional IT, data centers are, when you look at servers, physical servers years ago in data centers, only 15% of each of those servers or 12% of those servers was ever actually utilized. When organizations started moving to virtualization, we saw that utilization go much higher to 50%. Well, with containers, because we're able to actually virtualize the kernel and the operating system as opposed to hardware-assisted virtualization, we're able to get dramatically increased density to run more applications on a single server. You get flexibility in the way that you actually do that, and you get consistency in the way you deploy those. So containers is a new thing in Windows Server. That's a feature that you can add, giving you that cloud-like isolation. Okay, so born in the cloud isolation that we already have in Microsoft Azure. We already use containers in Microsoft Azure. So you have that ability to do that. So what is a container? Now, when you think about traditional virtualization, this is how it kind of looks. All right, we have our hardware sitting at the bottom layer, and we have a thin layer of code that sits between the operating system and the hardware. It's called our hardware-assisted virtualization. It's about 130 megabytes. Traditional virtual machines equals hardware virtualization, meaning that each virtual machine gets its own kernel. Then we put our applications and all that kind of stuff on top of that. We put an OS on that, and everything gets installed. That's something we've all been fairly used to over the last few years. Containers is all about operating system virtualization, meaning that in a container environment, what we're doing is we're sharing the kernel and we're spinning up multiple containers on top of that. Okay, so we have a kernel that has been optimized to support containers to allow us to then run our processes and allow us to have multiple containers, meaning that containers will take up less memory, they will actually take up less space, and they will be able to be giving us that higher density than we get with traditional virtual machines. So in technical preview 3, what we added with, what capabilities we added with containers is that we gave the ability to build, write once, and scale within those containers. We added the capabilities built into Windows Server. This is the first time we added containers added there. So it allows you to build modular applications that leverage containers. Okay, so you can build these out of Visual Studio to support containers. You can deploy containers using PowerShell or using Docker. Okay, so you can add Docker to your Windows Server, and you can manage your containers using Docker commands, or you can use PowerShell for that. We can define resources, so CPU, memory resources per container, along with storage and network throughput. Okay, so if you want to add additional, if you want to be able to manage the resources of each of those, each container gets its own IP options for connectivity. We provide NAT, DHCP, static IP for network connectivity. So we have that capability that's built into that. So we have core functionality for containers supported natively within the kernel, and they will be available in Windows Server 2016. Developers can use their familiar development tools such as Visual Studio to write their apps to run within containers. So there's no need to backport existing applications, all that kind of stuff, by building modular apps and leveraging containers. So applications can rely on their other packages, and we have that core functionality built in. There are 2 containers. So example, in this particular scenario, I have from the graphic, there are 2 containers that are actually sharing a number of libraries. And in addition, when packaged, the packages also depend on base packages. which describe the underlying operating system, such as Server Core, which has a large number of APIs that support, such as .NET, IIS, Nano Server is another. It's a much smaller surface, and we've built this with the cloud in mind. Okay, so for this is kind of like, here we've got a web tier for container A, and that web tier is a line of business application with its binaries. And if you look at it in the file system, it actually looks like another copy of Windows. It shares some libraries across that. So in this case, it's sharing libraries with the application tier in container B. And then you have a DB tier for that, and it has some libraries that it's not sharing. But all in all, we're sharing the same kernel across this, giving us increased density to run our multi-tier applications. So that's pretty cool that we've added that in there. New in Technical Preview 4 is what we've added in Technical Preview 4 is, and this is kind of where Microsoft is differentiating ourselves, is this notion of what we call Hyper-V containers. And they use the same APIs as Windows Server so that we have consistency across management and deployment. So Hyper-V containers use the exact same images as Windows Server containers, but we get that stronger isolation because they get their dedicated kernel copy that is built on Hyper-V technology. It gives us that extra Hyper-V virtualization layer and OS optimization layer to allow us to then build our containers on top of that. So that's new in Technical Preview 4. Make sure you go and have a look at that because that's a really big thing that's been changed. Now, before we close, I'm going to quickly talk about management and what we're doing that, and finally show you a demo of a new tool that we have in Azure. Now, there certainly is a shifting need in IT management, moving away from single-based management, managing individual servers, to retooling for cloud-based integration. And we're seeing a lot of changes in that particular space. Microsoft we're actually doing a lot of work to be able to do what we call Microsoft hybrid management across any platform and any cloud. We want to be able to manage no matter which cloud you're actually doing. So if you haven't had a chance already, make sure you have a look at OMS, or the Operations Management Suite, that integrates into System Center for your on-premises environment. This is really cool in the sense that it allows you to kind of manage your environment from the cloud, giving you end-to-end monitoring, preemptive health capacity, and usage tracking and real-time alerts. So if you want to see what's going on with your servers, you can do real-time alert management from the cloud. And if you do, and you get the ability to model how you want to manage your environment and get deep insight how you want to automate this, and then do it once and be able to use it both in your on-premises or your cloud environment. We also support always-on backup and disaster recovery, and continuous health recovery, health monitoring, and disaster recovery with OMS. We also get a very thorough look at the health checkup so that you can get a lot of information of looking at thorough system health, full exposure into your environment, and forensic and breach analysis of those environments as well. So it's very, very good from being able to provide that information. The really cool thing that we've added in Operations Management Suite is to be able to have a conversation with both developers and IT pros to get visibility into real-time performance of applications. To be able to find out, okay, to really eliminate the finger pointing that goes on. I chucked the application over the fence and it was working fine on my machine, but the IT guys screwed it up when they deployed it in their environment. So we can get faster fault analysis to dive down directly into the code to see what's actually going on with that. And we do that through the Operations Management Suite. Now we're going to have a complete session on System Center 2016, but I wanted to give you some high-level stuff that we're working on with System Center 2016. Obviously, being able to support Windows 10 deployments through System Center Config Manager, and to integrate into MDM enrollment with Azure AD, access restriction based on device and enrollment policy. The other thing is to support all the features that are coming in Windows Server 2016. Including all the new Hyper-V features, rolling cluster upgrades, simplified networking, being able to actually support shielded VMs, and to be able to support shielded guarded host management, and support for vCenter 5.5. From a monitoring point of view, we want to make sure that as we move to this new world of headless servers through Nano Server, we need to be able to monitor this through Operations Manager. So we'll have support into managing and monitoring Nano Server, storage, SMIS support. We'll have a new management catalog, performance improvement, and a SCOM partner program. from System Center SCO, we'll have new runbooks that'll be available, integration packs. From a self-service point of view, from Service Manager, improved usability and performance, and a new HTML5 based self-service portal. Think goodbye to Silverlight. Data protection will support Azure Express Route, shielded VMs, storage spaces direct. All the storage features that we're going to have in Windows Server 2016 will be available in that as well. You know, so when you combine these two together, from a management perspective, being able to, we know that a lot of customers are running System Center. OMS actually give you, by adding OMS Operations Management Suite, you get the ability to manage not only your on-premises environment, but also your cloud environment as you start to move certain workloads into the cloud, and all these things that are available across both of these platforms. So we think that, you know, having these two together gives you that holistic view to be able to respond quickly to these issues that, you know, any issues that you might have in your environment. But before we actually close today's webinar, I wanted to quickly give you a look at a new tool that we have in Windows Server. We will be covering System Center demos a lot more later in a future webinar, but I wanted to show you something that we're working on in Microsoft Azure, which is our new server management tools that allow you to manage both on-premises and in the cloud. So let's have a look at the demo so you can see what this looks like. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about managing your servers from anywhere. Okay, so I've got a number of Windows Server 2016 servers running Technical Preview 4, and this is my on-premises infrastructure. Okay, so I've got a domain controller, a management server, and I got 3 servers that have no UI. These are what we would call headless servers, and these servers are running Server Core of Windows Server 2016, which is the default install. Now I can manage those servers on premises if I have access to all my tools. So I can use Server Manager. In this case, I've got a Windows 10 machine that is currently being used as my admin server, and I'm running the November update of Windows 10, build 15.11. And I've added the RSAT tools to allow me to manage that server, those servers that I've got in my environment. This includes a bunch of tools like Server Manager, which allows me to do a whole bunch of things and see a whole lot of information about those servers. It's the typical tools that we've been using in Windows Server since Windows Server 2012 to manage these servers and be able to do my on-premises management. Now, what if I wanted to be able to manage those servers from the cloud, or I had some servers that were sitting in Azure and I had some servers sitting in my on-premises environment? Well, right now in preview, we have a new set of tools that are in public preview right now as part of Azure called the Server Management Tools, which are a web-based set of remote GUI tools that can be used to manage your Windows Server 26 installations. So essentially it allows you to manage your previews. So I've got a couple servers that are already here, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to go and create a connection to one of those servers. Now, essentially what I need to do is, normally what you would do is, if you haven't done this before, is you would go into the marketplace and you would do a search for server management tools. So in the server management tools dashboard, it kind of tells you a little bit about what this is. And what it's telling you here is that how you can actually manage your tools. Now we haven't got everything there at the moment, as you can see from that list. We've got a few things that you can do. We're going to be adding stuff later on as we get feedback from customers. But essentially, that diagram at the bottom kind of shows you how this all works. Because essentially, what you end up with is a web browser. So if you don't have your machine with you, or you're from home or something like that, and you use the Server Management Tools service within Microsoft Azure, that then connects to a gateway. And the gateway is installed on a server sitting on premises in your environment, or a server sitting in Microsoft Azure, to allow you to then connect to your Windows Server 2016 boxes. In my case, what I've done is I have installed the gateway on my management server. Okay, so that has the gateway installed. And I'm going to go ahead and create a connection to one of my server core boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and create a connection to one of my server core boxes. And I need to go and select, I can choose my subscription, choose my resource group, and then I'm going to go and configure my gateway. And I've simply called my gateway Contoso, and then go ahead and create that. And essentially what that's going to do is that's going to go and create a resource in Microsoft Azure. And what you're seeing there on the screen is you see dc.contoso.com, which is my domain controller. That's a resource that's already in Azure. It doesn't create a connection to that particular server. All it does is create a resource. And then you need to go and choose your gateway server and then choose the account that you actually want to log on to. Now, once that's actually done, it's going to go and detect that the gateway's there, and you can see that it's come up there and it's already found the gateway server. It's found my logon settings here because I've already set that in before with this particular one. And you can notice that once I've actually done that, I can choose Manage As, and I want to go and manage who am I going to log on to on this machine. I'm going to just choose my credentials. And that gives us some information about the server. So what we get here is we get some information like CPU percentage, memory percentage, some other, the network adapters and their addresses. And as I said, we can manage, one of the cool things you can do is, hey, look at this, you can go and manage Device Manager. So you can go and see the devices that are connected to this. You can run some PowerShell commands against this particular, so what it'll do is it'll connect, it'll do an enter PS session to that box through the gateway, allowing you to run remote PowerShell commands against that particular box. You can see the current processes that are running on that box. You can go in and modify the registry. You can see the roles and features that are installed. You can see the services that are installed on that particular machine or that are currently running on that machine. So this is a really good option. And if you look at the gateway, if I click on Contoso, it'll tell me information about the gateway itself, and that the type of gateway that we have. And I've set it up on my local machine. And essentially what we do is when we set up our gateway and we do a setup of that particular gateway, we generate a package link. I'm not going to generate that package link here. That is valid for, I'd say about 30 minutes or so. You take that package link, you download it to your server you're designating as your gateway server. And then at that point, you can connect that up to your Azure subscription, and that can be used as your gateway for all of your servers that are on in the same resource group or on the same subnet on your local machine. So we think that's going to be a really exciting option for hybrid models going forward, and we think it's a good way for you to be able to do some lightweight management of your Server 2016 server. So if you get a chance, have a look at it when you're doing your testing of the Windows Server 2016 technical preview. Thanks very much. Okay, so to close today and to wrap up this webinar, I wanted to just reiterate a couple of things that we covered today. First of all, these 4 buckets: the software-defined data center, cloud service delivery, the modern application platform, and management everywhere. In order for you to get to the cloud model, you notice I'm not saying getting to the cloud. What I want you to think about is, how do I actually get to cloud architecture? Remember, cloud is not a place, cloud is an architecture. So from a software-defined data center point of view, you need to think about changing how your processes work and your patterns to remove silos within your infrastructure, islands of information. Enable self-service access to resources and consistency across all the clouds that you might have in. Rethink your applications. Are they taking advantage of the cloud? Are they working in a born in the cloud type of environment? And making hybrid management part of your strategy. So with that, I would like to thank you for taking the time today. If there are any more questions that you have, please post them into the question and answer panel, and we'll be there to answer those. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. I know it's hard to get time to spend on webinars. I do appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you on a future TechNet Live webinar. Thanks, guys, and have a wonderful day.